So hello everyone, welcome to another video on object-oriented programming with C++. My name is Aditya Samtohide. I am your faculty for this course. In the last video, that is your introduction video part 1, we had a very brief overview of what the syllabus contains. We talked at a very high level about all the different topics in the syllabus. Then we saw what are some features of C++. We did not look at depth, but then we uh, talked at a very high level. What is the reason that we will study C++ in spite of learning C? All right. Then we looked at a C++ program, and finally we ended by looking at different programming paradigms. There are four different paradigms. I gave you an example of a Prolog program, and we saw that out of this four paradigm there is a paradigm called object oriented programming, and we talked about how C++ was designed to make programs in this paradigm. All right. In this video, we are going to talk about what are some features, what are some object-oriented concepts. Right. Uh, so let us begin this video. The first thing that we are going to talk about is what is this object-oriented, the basic crux of this topic. All right. Now let us say, sorry. All right. Let us say I want to write a program where I am going to keep details about cars. All right. So in my program, I want to have this thing. My program will contain name of car, and then it is going to contain what is the distance that the car has traveled. But then unfortunately, I do not have any device that can directly tell me what is the distance that a car has traveled. I have to infer it indirectly by looking at another parameter. What is the number of rounds that the wheel has traveled, has rotated? All right. So I can do it this way. I can have two arrays. One array of name. This, if you look internally, it is going to be a two-dimensional array, and this is going to have, say, Audi. Okay. Say Tesla and more. All right. Let us not worry about syntax of programming language in this class. I'm going to just show you some concepts. We are going to go into syntax and more details. We are going to execute proper programs in the next class. All right. So in today's class, let us just look at the concepts from a theoretical perspective. All right. So I have one array in which the names of the car would be there, and in another array I will need sorry, not speed. It will be rounds, the number of rounds that the wheels have rotated. Okay, this is going to be a array of integers. So somewhat 1000, 2000 or whatever. Now I will need some function in order to get this value, right? How many times the uh, wheels have rotated. I have to convert this into what is the distance that the car has traveled. So I will need some sort of a function that is going to return int some integer telling me how much distance the car has traveled. Okay, get distance travel, and I have to specify what is the car that I am interested in. So I have to specify some integer that would in turn point to, say, if I'm interested in knowing how much the Tesla car has traveled. So here Tesla is in index 1, so I will put 1 over here. All right. So this is going to do what? This is going to return and calculate using rounds 1. All right. So I can have this kind of a program. Right. Now, there is this thing. Say I am making some application for my dashboard of the car, where I am going to simply write what is the distance that a car has traveled. Okay. Now I am not interested in knowing what is the number of rounds that the wheels has rotated. Right. So this is some uh, data. Okay. This array is something that I should not have any interest in. I do not want to access this data type. I do not want to modify it. I do not want to do anything with this. So yeah, that is what I have. I may have another array of string. Okay, this would be say XYZ, say ABC. This is the name of the owner of the car. Okay, so this is something that I am going to do in C. Now my car will have some other data types. All right, like who is the user that has connected to the infotainment system with their Bluetooth. So all these different data about what are the different Bluetooth devices that have connected to this infotainment, different phones that have connected to this infotainment system. Okay, so I need to keep more arrays regarding phone. Okay, then what is the MAC address of the Bluetooth chip? What is the pairing code that was used? All right, so all these different things have to be in my code. There will be different more function that does something with Bluetooth. This will also take parameters and so on. So ultimately what is going to happen, my code is going to get all jumbled up. Okay, and once my code gets jumbled up, what may happen is that if I have written lakhs of lines of code for a car, and it is very easy that a car's system will have lakhs of lines of code. Okay, that's not a big deal. But then without organization of code, okay, at some later point of time, if some other people have to make updates to the code, okay, or they have to do add some new features, then it becomes very difficult for that person to use this code. The code becomes unmanageable, so that person will have to go through lots of documentation, will have to go through your code and then find out what is this round variable, where is it being used. Okay, uh, so all these difficulties coming. Now yes, there are ways to uh, segment this code into different places. For example, we may keep libraries. So one type of library file will handle, uh, say, Bluetooth infotainment system. Another library file will handle this distance travel system. Okay, so we may do that, but that also does not properly organize the code in the sense that there is no protection of code, and then still things are scattered around. Okay, it may so happen that for some reason name clash is occurring. Okay, my Bluetooth, inside my Bluetooth there can be name, this uh, data type name. Okay, and the name in my Bluetooth module may refer to the name of your phone. Okay, we give names to our phone, right, of Bluetooth names with which we can identify our phone. So we may have that, and then this module about ownership. Okay, that may have names. Okay, the name of the owner of the car, and these two variables, they have the same name, a variable name. So that may result in clash, and this may result in your data in your program behaving inconsistently. So lots of problems may arise because of this reason. This new uh, paradigm of programming, object oriented programming, is vision. In object oriented programming, what will happen is that we will have something called objects. Okay, so we will have two objects from this example. So one object would be the Bluetooth object, one object would be the car object. Same. Now owner, okay, would be a this array of strings, or no, sorry, would be just a string, okay, and then rounds would be just a integer, okay, and then get distance travel function, right? So this get distance travel and this rounds and the owner, these are uh, data that makes sense together. This define the attributes of a car, okay. So this would be put together in one unit of code. Similarly, Bluetooth, say there will be name, okay. So name of the device, MAC address of the device, this would be string, this would be string, and then say pairing digit, this would be int, and then say some function, Bluetooth related function, this would be there, okay. So all these Bluetooth related variables, this data, and the Bluetooth related code would be put together in one unit, in one object, in one box of code, okay. Similarly, all this data and all this uh, function, okay, methods, all this code that deals with the car would be in another unit of code, okay. So this is something that uh, object oriented programming gives us, okay. It allows us to organize our code into different blocks, so that the codes that have these their meanings together, that make sense together, would be put together in one block of code, okay. And this allows us to partition our code into different blocks, and that gives us a better way of programming, in the sense that now even if our program is very large, we know that one concept is encapsulated, is put together inside one unit, and we can look at one unit, it is self-contained, it's like a black box, okay. uh, and we can use that, right? So this is one advantage. We, in object oriented code, as we will see in this course, allows us to write our program in such a way that different uh, part of code that make sense together, okay, they are segmented, these different concepts, they are segmented, okay. And if the concepts are segmented, then the code would be segmented, and all these different code that make sense together would be put together inside one block. This block would be an object, okay. So we will see what is classes. Classes are essentially definition of this object. So we will see what is classes, what is object, and all these things throughout this course. If you are not understanding in depth what I am saying in this video, some of you do, some of you have studied C++ in plus 2. For them this course would be easy, but when for the people who did not do this course back in school or back in uh, 11 12, for them some of these concepts are going to be new. All right, so let's see what the definition says. This object oriented programming is based on the concept of object. A object contains two types of thing. One is the data, okay, like we saw, this can be the type of data, okay. This would be the data, and then the other is code. This is code that works on that data, that uses this data. So this data that we have, they are called fields, attributes, properties. You will often find me using these different terminologies to refer to the same thing. So when I say data, I can instead say fields, or I can instead say attribute, or I can instead say properties. Similarly, this code, they are called procedures or methods. Okay, or function. Essentially, these are function that you studied in C. So yeah, we have an object. Inside this object, we have this data and the code that works on this data. Right? These two things together, they form an object. In object-oriented programming, computer programs are designed by making them out of objects that interact with one another. These objects, they will interact with one another. We will see an example in today's class, where all these different objects, they work together to create a software, and this software completes the system. This software will give us a complete system. All right. So yeah. Now, one of the features that object-oriented programming will give us is abstraction. Abstraction is the concept of object-oriented programming that shows only essential attributes and hides unnecessary information. Okay, so yeah, only the things that we need to see are given to us. The things that are we don't need to worry about are hidden from us. Okay, so here is an example of something called abstract painting. This is an abstract painting. Okay, from the painting you can see that this is a cat. Okay, so this is not a very detailed painting. This, on the other hand, is a photorealistic painting. Here there are lots of details in the photorealistic painting. All the details are given to us. All the details regarding a cat is given to us. On the other hand, in this other picture of this abstract cat, okay, only the overview of the shape is given to us. We are not given the inner details, all this detailed view of the cat. But by looking at this abstract view, we can still figure out that it's a cat, right? So this is what abstraction, this word abstraction means, that the inner details are hidden, only a high level overview, a general idea is presented to us. Now let me give you an example that we talked about in yesterday's class about what abstraction does. Okay, we know what is a stack, right? Now a stack can be written as an object. In C++, it can be written using this object-oriented programming style. Okay, so in object-oriented programming style, we can have a stack. So there are essentially three functions that we are interested in running. We will initialize the stack init, init. Okay, let me rewrite this again. We will initialize this stack with some number. This is going to be what is the size of the maximum size of the stack. Okay, then we have push. So this is a stack of integers right now. Okay, so we can push number to the stack, and we can pop numbers from the stack. Okay, now these are three things that should be shown to us as a programmer. Okay, say I am going to create some application that is going to use a stack. Now I am not interested in all the other details about this stack. For example, is it made with an array? Is it made with a linked list? How is it being implemented? That is something that I am not interested in. What am I interested in? I am interested in knowing that there are three functions, this function, and this function, that I should use in order to uh, write a program that uses stack. For example, I can use a stack in order to find whether my parentheses in my program are balanced. Okay, so this is an example of a balanced parenthesis. What I will do when I am going to so when I am going to see this parenthesis, this open parenthesis, I am going to insert some x into this stack. When I see another parenthesis, I am going to insert another x, or I can insert a number. Instead, say I am inserting 1 to the stack. When I see this closing parenthesis, I am going to pop from the stack. and when I see another closing parenthesis, I'm going to pop again from the stack. Okay, let us say I have more of this. I'm going to insert again. I see another open, I insert again. I see a closing parenthesis, I pop once. I see another open parenthesis, I push again. So when I was saying insert, I was actually meaning push. Okay. And I see a closing parenthesis, I pop again. So I have reached the end of my string. It seems my stack is not empty. That means this string that I have is not balanced. Okay, so I have what, 5 uh, close parentheses, but then only 5 open parentheses, only 4 close parentheses. So if I have one more closing parenthesis, this would be pop, and I would know that my uh, parentheses are balanced. Right. So this is an application where I may have a stack. All right. So here's the deal. As a writer of this application, am I interested in knowing whether my stack is created with a linked list or with an array? Okay, I have no interest, right? What are the interests? That I am allowed to use these three uh, functions. All right. Now I am not even interested in knowing how these functions are implemented. What is the code that is inside this function? I am only interested in knowing that I should be able to use this function. Okay. So see, I can use a stack, okay, but then I do not need to know all the details of this stack, of how the things are happening behind the scene. What I am only interested in is this abstract view of the stack, where I am only provided that there are uh, these three functions that I can call in order to uh, do my application, right, in order to write my application. So this is abstraction. This abstraction is provided to us through object oriented programming. Okay, next is encapsulation. Now let's go back to this to that example of car, where I have uh, this function int get distance travel, and parameters this int uh, what rounds, and string owner. Okay, so what encapsulation does is, encapsulation is a mechanism that binds together code and data that it manipulates and keeps them safe from outside interference and misuse. Okay, so code and data and code that make sense together, that is the data and the code that works on that data together, they are taken together inside one box. Okay, this is the box that we are talking about, and then this is hidden from outside world. This means this thing. See this parameter rounds. This contains data on how many rounds the wheel has traveled. Right now, this is something that the say I do not want other people to have access to rounds. Okay, so people may come in, change this value, make some error when changing this value, and moreover, when creating this class, say I have this belief that people should not be able to access rounds. That is not something of their concern. People want to know how much distance they have traveled. That is the only thing that people should be able to do. Okay, so what I can do is I can set permission on this different data and different function. Okay, so let us say this owner, this string owner, I want to make it public. That is, I want code outside my class to be able to change, to access it, and to be able to change it. Okay, uh, so why for example, at some point of time it may so happen that I am going to sell my car, and then if I sell my car, the ownership will get transferred, right? So this car selling code should be able to change this variable, okay, owner. So I am going to give outside code access to this variable. So code outside this class would be able to change the value of owner. Okay. Now this function also, I am going to make it public. Public in the sense outside code, code outside this class. This is a class. This is a car class. Okay. And when I say class, I mean a chunk of code that are together. Okay, a block of code. Code and their associated data type. Okay, so this function, this method, I want code outside the class to have access. So my dashboard software, okay, dashboard class, that is going to ultimately display how much I have traveled on the dashboard along with other data. Okay, that is going to use this function to get how much kilometers I have traveled. Okay, so yeah, this get distance travel, this function should be accessible by other people. So I am going to make it public. This owner should be accessible by other people or other code outside the class. When I am saying people, I mean code outside the class. Okay, so I am making this also public. On the other hand, this rounds. Okay, this I do not think that other people outside my class should have access to this variable. Okay, I want to make it private. So what does this mean? This means that code outside my block of code, okay, my class code should not have access to this variable. That means code outside my class should not be able to read this variable and should not be able to change this variable. Okay, so if someone wants data from this variable rounds, they will get the distance travel through this uh, get distance travel function. Okay, there is no direct access to this variable from outside the class. Of course, in this function, this get distance travel function, this is inside my class. In get distance travel, I can access this code. Okay, I can access this round. I can access this variable. So yeah, inside my class, I will have access to all the private members as well as the public members, but outside my class I will not have access to the private variables, right? I will have access to only the public ones. Now like this private variable, I may have private functions as well. Okay, so say this get distance travel is the function that is that I'm going to use, right? Now there might be uh, another function, say in kilometer to miles. Okay. Now see, what may happen. I'm just giving you scenarios. What may happen is that this rounds. Okay. The formula that I have to convert rounds to uh, distance is giving me the distance in kilometer. Okay, but then the car wants to display in the dashboard in miles. So what this get distance travel should return is the distance in miles. Okay, but the rounds, the formula that I have is to convert this rounds to kilometer. Okay, so I will use that rounds. I will get that in kilometer from using this formula. Okay, then I will have some function kilometer to miles that I am going to use to convert this distance in kilometer to distance in miles. Okay, so yeah, this is one more function that I may have. Now once again, I do not think that this function should be used outside the class. Okay, there is no point giving other people outside the class access to this function. This function is internal to my class. This will be used by get distance travel to convert the kilometer to miles, and people outside this class, code outside this class, should not have access to this function. Okay, so only inside this class, only this function should have access to this other function. Okay, so I am going to make this function private string. All right, so what I am doing here is I am making part of my code accessible to the public. I am making part of the code private so that only code inside the class can access it. Okay, so this concept is known as encapsulation. This enables data hiding, and by hiding this data we prevent misuse of this data. Okay, code and data may be combined in such a way that a self-contained black box is created. And now this is a black box in the sense people do not see inside and know what is the value of round. People cannot see inside and use this function kilometer to miles. Okay, this black box, you know what is a black box? A black box are there in aeroplanes. They record everything. They cannot be accessed externally, and they are broken into and retrieved for investigation once a plane has crashed. Okay, so a black box is not penetrable. You cannot go inside a black box. So yeah, we cannot get inside this black box. This car class is our black box, and we cannot go inside unless and until we are permitted to do so. Only the things that we are permitted to have access to can be accessed. All right. So a object is a device that supports this kind of features. So this data hiding and everything. This is called encapsulation. All right. So yeah, this is what we have. Again, talking about encapsulation, it is, as I said, it enables this concept of data hiding. A class do not allow, if a class do not allow calling code to access internal object data and permits access through methods only, then that is a strong form of abstraction and information hiding. So these things are known as encapsulation, right? So a class should not allow outside users to access the data, this data that is inside the class. Okay, so access to the data should be permitted only through function. So if that is happening, then this is very good abstraction. Okay, and this feature is known as encapsulation. So this feature allows us to do things like code refactoring and encourages decoupling. Let me tell you what is code refactoring. Okay, code refactoring is essentially rewriting of code. For example, I gave you this stack example of the stack class. It had three functions in it. With a parameter, the size of the stack, and then void push, and import. Okay. Now a outside user knows that only these three things are there in the stack. Say at one point of time, I had created the stack using an array. Okay. Now I created this using an array. At some later point of time, I decide that uh, I am no longer going to use array. I am going to change my code. I am now going to use linked list. Okay. So at some later point of time, I'm going to change the code. When I use linked list instead of an array, now I have to change all the three functions as well. Previously, they were accessing an array. Now they are going to access a linked list. Now what is going to happen? A program that was using this class. Okay, uh, to use an stack is not going to be affected, right? These three things, the format of these three function is going to stay the same. Instead of me using a linked list instead of an array, uh, nothing is going to change on the signature of my functions, right? So the code that use this class, okay, can use this new class without any effect. Okay, everything is going to stay the same from the perspective of code outside this class. So this gives us better ways to refactor our code, okay, to rewrite our code and to write new code without affecting the rest of the code in the larger program. Okay, we can change things inside the class without affecting code outside the class. And it encourages decoupling. Decoupling, coupling means intertwingle. Okay, two things are coupled together if they have too much uh, what dependency on one another. Okay, here the dependency is removed because let's look at this example. This rounds. Okay, rounds had how many times the wheel was turning. Okay, now if some outside this class, if some code is accessing this variable round, okay, then there would be a bit higher degree of coupling because one class is using variable inside of another class, uh, and at a later point of time if I change the code, I no longer use this variable round, I use something else, then code outside my class is going to get affected, right? So this is one problem. Now if I do not even allow outside classes, outside code to access all this data, then there is no chance of this coupling. Okay, so when this coupling, when this interdependency is reduced, it is called decoupling. So encapsulation allows decoupling of code. This is good practice. Your different classes should not be too dependent on the other classes. Only the interfaces that are given to you from the other classes should be used by some other class. Alright, so yeah, this is what we have. Now I am using this word class and object. Okay, what is a class? A class, the definition says the definition for the data format and available procedures for a given type or class of object. This is what we have. Okay, don't worry about this too much. So a class is essentially, say, a car. It will have a string. Uh, Tesla, and it will have some int, say rounds, okay, and it will have some function, kilometer to miles, and it will have some function, get distance traveled. Okay, so this is what a class looks like. Okay, there will be other things. For example, I want to make this public, right? So I have to write public over here. I want to make this private, I will write private over here. I want to make this private, so private is still on. I want to make this public. I have to write public over here. Don't worry too much about these things. I am just saying that this should be public, these two should be private, and this should be public. Okay, and by default, if I don't give public, then everything would be private. Okay, so that is one more thing. Don't worry about this. We have the entire course remaining to talk about this in details. Uh, Now this definition is called a class. Alright. Now when I want to use this in my program, I am going to create an object out of this class. I am going to write The car class name is car, so I'm going to write car, say C. Okay, and then I am interested in knowing distance travel, so that is my variable x in my program. This is say my main program. I am going to do c dot get distance travel. Okay, so see, this here is my object. This is a instance of this class. So when we have this definition, this is just a definition. So when we are going to use this definition, we have to create an object. From the definition, we have to create an actual uh, object that occupies memory in RAM. Okay, so this class will occupy memory in RAM. Now, uh, once I have created this object, I can get use any methods or variable by writing a dot in front after this object name and then writing the name of this function. So I have this object C. Okay, C is an object of type class, and I am calling this function get distance travel of this object C. Okay, so this is what I have. I had a teacher during my MTech. He explained this thing to me in a way that I still remember. I don't know if it would make sense to you, but then he said uh, a class is like a geet, and an object is like a sangeet. So essentially, I believe he tried to mean that a class is like the lyrics of a song, and the object is when you actually sing out the song. Okay, so that's a definition that I'm going to remember. All right, so this is classes and object. We will in the next class we will write a class and we will create objects out of the class, and we will see how to use class. I believe by the end of the next class, okay, there are lots of classes. By the end of your next lecture, you will be able to use define class and use them in your program. All right, and also at the end of next week, I believe you would have done one assignment problem that uses classes. All right, next is inheritance. Okay, let me explain inheritance once again with an example. Let us take this class that we have been talking about too much already. This class, our car class. Okay, it had two variables. One was string owner, and another was integer rounds. Once again, I am intentionally making some mistakes in writing the data types over here because I want you to know that I am not writing code today. Okay, I am just trying to show you some ideas. Okay, so don't worry about syntax of the code. These are ideas. I don't want you to think these are codes. And then there is this function get distance travel. Now this was my class. Okay, uh, forget the other function. Let us suppose that is not there. It is kilometer to miles. So say this is my complete class. Now I want to create something more. I want to create new classes that actually can warn me whether I should fill my cylinder with petrol or should I charge my car. Okay, now there are two types of car nowadays. One is this electric car and one is the petrol based car. So I gave you two examples. One would be Audi, okay, and the other example was of Tesla. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to create two classes. Okay, what is the new function that this Audi class should store? it should store should fill petrol, and this class should charge. Okay, so these are two new functions that will be there. But apart from these two functions, everything else in these two classes would be same as the car class. Okay. Now I have two classes, Audi class and Tesla class. Okay. In Audi class, I have one more function apart from this that were already there. What were already there? String owner and int rounds. And I had this function get distance travel. And similarly here too I have string owner, this integer rounds, and get distance travel. Okay, this is integer return. Okay, so these things are same as in my car class. These things are same as in my car class. This function, same function, this same type of data. Okay, and these are same as that were there in my car class. So what can I do is I can use this feature called inheritance that allows me to inherit all this data and all this function from my parent class. Okay, for the Audi, this is the derived class, this Audi class is the derived class, and it inherits this data and this function from this class, right? So this gives me that advantage that when I create this Audi class or Tesla class, I don't have to rewrite lots of code that I had already written in the car class. I don't need to rewrite it over here. Okay, so this is one advantage that inheritance gives me. Inheritance is the mechanism of basing an object of class or class upon another object or another class. Okay, retaining similar implementation. So all this implementation that was there, that would be retained in this class, and this class is based on this car class. This Audi class is based on this car class, and all the data and all the function that were there in the car class are now retained in this Audi class. Okay, the Audi class has inherited all this data and function from the car class. Okay, so this is essentially inheritance. Now here uh, this is called a base class or superclass, and this is called the uh, derived class. Okay, and let me give you more example. It may so happen that we have, say, this hierarchy. Okay, I am going to I say I have this class called living beings. Okay, this living beings is going to be superclass of two classes. That is two classes. One is animals and another is plants. These two classes, animals and plants, are going to inherit the living being class. Okay. Now inside animals, it may so happen that there are two classes, birds and mammals. Okay. Now mammals is going to inherit all the properties of animals. Animals are is going to inherit all the properties of living beings. Okay, so in this way, we may have a hierarchy of classes. So in say living being, there is this data called name. So this would contain the name of the species. So animal is going to by default contain name. It is going to inherit the name. Okay, from the parent class. Now let us say in animals I have one more parameter, number of legs, one more data. Okay, now this animal has two data. One is the name that it inherited from this parent class. Okay, and one is the number of legs that it defined on its own. Okay, so now I have two variables in animals. Now say birds. Okay, this is going to inherit this animal class. So by default it is going to get name and number of legs. Okay, these two variables are going to be there by default because they are inherited from animals. Okay, so animals inherited name from living beings, and then birds inherited name and number of legs from animals. Okay, now once I have inherited uh, these two, this birds is say going to have one more parameter, length of wings. Okay, so in this way we can have a hierarchy, we can have a tree of all these different classes, all these inheritance. All right, so this is another feature that inheritance allows us to do. At a later point of time we are going to look at this with experiments in laboratory and also in theory classes. So yeah, this is what we have. Then the last big topic that I'm going to talk about is polymorphism in today's class. Okay. Once again, let us go back to the stack class. Okay. So this is your stack class. It has lots of things inside, and it has this push that takes some parameter. Okay. Now it may so happen that I want to push integer into the class. I may want to push floating point into the class, or I may want to push some long integer into the class. Okay, now what may happen, do I do this, I can have push integer and then int some number that I want to push float, then some float some number that I want to push, and push what double, say, so some double that I want to push. Okay, so here what is happening, in order to push some variable into the stack. Okay, this class is the stack class. So in order to push some variable into the stack, I may have three different function in these three use cases that I told you about. Okay, so is this a good design? I would argue not. Okay, instead, see, the user is tasked, the user of this class, this programmer that is going to use this class stack, now has to worry about which function do I call. Okay, and then if the array, say if the number that he wants to push is dynamic. Okay, so at one point of time he may push integer, at some other point of time he is pushing float. Okay, so this is not a good example, but then try to get the idea behind what I am saying. Okay, so what to do now, this is not a good design. Instead, C++ allows us to do this thing. In C++, I can have the same void push. Okay, with integer x, void push with float x, and void push with double x. Okay, so now see the difference. I have the same function in my same program, and I have divided the same function 3 times. Okay, so the function name is the same. So this becomes easier for the programmer because he does not have to worry about 3 different function or managing 3 different function. uh, there is only one function and he is going to call this function, and the compiler is going to figure out which of these 3 different actual function behind the scene is going to be called. Okay, all of them have the same name. Depending on what is the type of parameter passed, one of these 3 different function is going to be called. So different function actually, okay, behind the scene, but then the same name. Okay, this is called polymorphism, and this is enabled by a feature called function overloading. Okay, so this is polymorphism. A polymorphism is the attribute that allows one interface to control access to a general class of action. Okay, uh, so there is one interface, this push, and it is general in the sense this one function can take integer, can take floating point, can take double. Yes, of course, you may say things like can we simply use double and allow the compiler to do casting from double to integer to float as and when necessary. Okay, because of the reason I said this was a bad example, but then since we started using this example, let's go ahead with this. So polymorphism helps us to reduce complexity of the program by allowing the same interface, so this same interface, to be used for a general class of action. Right? It is the compiler's job to select the specific action that need to be applied in each of the situation. We don't need to do this selection manually, and we need to implement use only this general interface. Okay, so this is function or overloading. This is a type of polymorphism. Okay, so once again we will see in details. We are just going through introductory classes. Now there is one more type of polymorphism. Okay, that is operator overloading. Now operator overloading is this. Let me give you an example. Okay, say int x is equal to I have written 3 less than 1. Okay, or let me write 2 less than 1. So what is going to happen if I do printf of x? So once again, not following syntax, but this is not a real program. What will happen if I want to print x? It is going to print 4. Okay, because this is the left shift operator. It will do what? It will take this 2 that I have, and it is going to shift everything one step to the left. Okay, so if I shift everything one step to the left, what is going to happen? This 0 is going to come here, this 1 is going to come here, this 0 is going to come here, and this is going to get eliminated, and this blank space is going to be filled with a 0. Okay, and this is equal to 4. This was equal to 2. So this is one shift. If instead I had 2 shifts, then this would have happened. This was 2 previously, and now it is going to be shifted two places to the left. So this is going to come here, this is going to come here, and these two are going to get eliminated. So it is going to become 1 0, and these two blank spaces are going to be filled with zeros. So this is equal to 8. Okay, so yeah, if I shift two times. So yeah, this is the left shift operator. Okay, now in our example program that I showed you yesterday in the last video, we wrote cout hello world. Alright, so if you remember, this was the instruction that we used to print hello world to the standard output, and that is our terminal. Okay, now you can see one thing, the same left shift operator is being used here and here. Okay, so how do the compiler know which one to use? It knows from context. If this left shift operator is being used towards the right of this cout keyword, then the compiler will know that it's a print print statement is towards the right. Okay, whatever it's to the right of the left shift operator needs to be printed. If it is in normal context, then the compiler knows that left shift has to be done. Alright, so this is enabled by something called operator overloading, right? So operator overloading allows us to rewrite the meaning of operator, rewrite the meaning of these symbols. Let me give you an example of where this might be useful in the context of what we have been discussing today. Uh, so we saw the stack class. Let me define a stack. Okay, this S is the object of the class stack. So we already created the stack class. Okay, we did not. We uh, gave an overview of the stack class. Okay, but then let us create an object of class stack. Now in this object S, when I need to push something, I will do S dot push say 10, S dot push 20. So I have pushed 10 and 20 to the stack. Okay, so push is a method in this object, and this is how we call a method inside this object. Now operator overloading allows us to do things like, instead of writing this push over and over again, I can have things like this. I can simply write S plus 10, S plus 20, and this would mean the same thing. Okay, so plus this operator plus, I know this. Say if I write in Z equal to 10 plus 20 and I print Z, I will get 30. Okay, because that is the meaning of plus. Plus will add the two numbers that are in its two sides. But then I can rewrite the meaning of this symbol. I can overload this operator and I can give it a new meaning. So I can give it the meaning that when this operator appears towards the right of the an object of class stack. Okay, S is the object of class stack. So when this plus operator appears to the right of an object of class stack, my new meaning is that the plus means push. Push to the stack whatever comes towards the right of the plus symbol. Okay, so that is how I can give a new meaning to symbol. This symbol plus now has two meanings. One is the normal addition that it was doing previously. Okay, and now when it appears to the right of my object of class stack, it will have the meaning that push to the stack. So this operator, this symbol, its meaning is now overloaded. This is known as operator overloading. This is also a type of polymorphism that C++ enables us to do. Alright, So this is polymorphism. Finally, let us end today's class by looking at an example of a system that is made with object-oriented program. Okay, let us look at this. It is a e-voting system, and this kind of a diagram is called a UML, Unified Modeling Language class diagram. Okay. We are not going to worry too much about UML in this course, but this is a very important type of diagram used to represent a program. You will study these things in details in your software engineering course. Okay, apart from class diagram, there are lots of other diagram, use case diagram, sequence diagram, activity diagram, lots of things that can help us understand how a software is going to be implemented and how a software is going to be used. Okay, these are important in lots of places. For example, if you are going to apply to create some software, say you work in a company and your company is going to throw some tender in some place which needs to create a software. So in your tender document you have to draw all these diagrams and everything, right? And also in documentation you have to write all these things. So this is something that although uh, is not directly convertible to code, although nowadays uh, there are lots of IDEs that do convert class diagrams into skeleton code. Okay, so these are all things that you will learn in details in software engineering. But let us look at this diagram and try to understand what it says. Each of the box in this diagram, there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Each of the box in this diagram represents one class. Okay, so I have a voter class and a voter profile. The voter profile is going to inherit. Okay, this has means inherit this voter class. So I can see this voter ID, voter password, voter name. So voter ID, voter password, voter name are obtained from this class. This cast vote and view result are also obtained from this class. Now what does this 1 and 1 mean? It means that one voter profile class is going to use one voter class. Okay. Now there is this another class called cast vote, and a object of voter uh, class or voter profile class is going to cast a vote using this cast vote object. Okay, and one voter is going to cast only one vote. Similarly, there is this other class called admin. A admin can do what? It can update. One admin can update multiple voter profile. Okay. Similarly, one admin can add, update, and delete multiple candidates for the vote. Right. So this is how your entire entire this electronic voting system is defined. Okay, a person can look at this diagram and it can and that person will know about how to implement this software. Right. So this is an example of a software that is created using object-oriented program. Right. So yeah, this is what we have. Uh, we will look at more example. Maybe in your lab, of course, you are going to create lots of object-oriented code. You are going to implement several design patterns in iterator pattern, command pattern, and then MVC pattern. And before that, that will come much later. But before that, lots of other codes are going to be implemented. In our next class, that is tomorrow's class, we are going to look at all these things that we studied today, right? And we are going to actually code them using C++ and run those codes and see for ourselves what is happening. So this ends today's class. In today's class we talked about what is object-oriented programming, what abstraction means, what is encapsulation, how encapsulation hides data, and how this enables us to do code refactoring and how it encourages decoupling. Then we talked about what are classes and what are objects. Uh, we talked about inheritance, hierarchy of inheritance, and then we saw what is polymorphism, we saw what is function overloading and what is operator overloading, and we finally saw an example of a system that is created using object-oriented programming style. Now this program is this diagram that I'm showing you, this is not specific to C. Okay, this is just an overview. I don't know. By looking at this diagram, I will not be able to tell whether when this program is implemented, whether it is implemented in C++ or Java or Python. All I know is that this is implemented in some language that supports object-oriented programming. Okay, how do I know that? Because this is a class diagram. Classes and objects are going to be used to create this software, and this software was created in object-oriented programming paradigm. Okay, so that is something that I can realize by looking at this video. So this ends today's class. See you in the next class.